Hey everybody, this is Tim Chavez from Faith Matters. Today we're bringing you a story that defies expectations so completely that you really have to hear it straight from the source. Our guest was Daryl Davis, who's easily one of the most fascinating and inspiring people we've ever met. Daryl has spent his career as a professional musician, including decades playing alongside rock and roll legends Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a master of multiple instruments, but specializes on the piano, where he blends unbelievable talent, skill, and passion to create truly incredible music. But believe it or not, that may not be the most interesting thing about Daryl, and that's what we talked about in this conversation with him. Daryl first experienced anti-Black racism from strangers as a young boy, and it inspired a lifelong question: how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Over many years, that question eventually led him not just to meet, but befriend members and leaders of the Ku Klux Klan. As those friendships have blossomed, love and respect has grown in place of hate. And Daryl now estimates that he's been instrumental in persuading over 200 white supremacists to leave their hate groups. Along with his story, Daryl shares a provocative message that we should continuously allow people with incorrect or even abhorrent viewpoints to air their opinions. In Daryl's view, ignorance is the root of fear, hate, and destruction, and only by remaining together in the same cultural spaces, and even actively seeking out and conversing with those we disagree with, can we counter the root cause, ignorance, with education and exposure to better views. That's how Daryl says we can then eliminate the symptoms of fear, hate, and destruction. Daryl has told his story on platforms like the Joe Rogan Experience and TEDx, where he's garnered tens of millions of views and downloads. We also want to send a huge shout out of thanks to the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, known by their acronym FAIR, who introduced us to Daryl and made this interview happen. FAIR is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to advancing civil rights and liberties for all Americans, and promoting a common culture based on fairness, understanding, and humanity. Daryl is a senior fellow and advisory board member at FAIR, and you can find out more about their foundation at fairforall.org. A huge thanks to Daryl for taking time out of his recent trip to Utah to speak with us in studio. We really encourage you to listen through, as we think you'll walk away truly inspired. And with that, we'll jump right into the conversation with Daryl Davis.
Well, Daryl Davis, we are so honored to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure. Happy to join you all.
Thank you. We would love to just hear your story, and we have quite a few questions that we're excited to get to, but I think it would be really great for listeners to get a little bit of a feel of your background, and maybe you can start right now with your experience when you're 10 years old and you're part of, is it 4-H?
No, it was the Cub Scouts.
Cub Scouts. Okay, Cub Scouts.
Well, in order to understand that, we have to go back to the beginning.
Okay.
Before I was 10 years old.
Sure. Okay.
I'm 64 now, and I was the child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. So I grew up as an American embassy kid, living abroad in different countries all around the world. And I first started traveling. I'm from Chicago originally. I first started traveling in 1961 at the age of 3. And how it works is you're assigned by the State Department to a foreign country. You're there for 2 years. You come back home here to the States. You're here for a few months, a year if you request it, and then back overseas to another country for 2 years, back and forth, back and forth. My first exposure to school was overseas. At 3, I did kindergarten, 1st grade, 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade. Now, here's the interesting thing. We're talking in the 1960s, okay? Mm-hmm. So my classmates overseas were from all over the world. People sitting around me were from Nigeria, Japan, Russia, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, you name it. If those countries had an embassy where we were assigned, all of their kids went to the same school. Mm. So that being my first exposure to school, that became my baseline as to what school was supposed to be. To me, it was just the norm. But every time I'd come home back here to my own country, I would either be in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. So one time when I came back, now understand this, desegregation was passed by the Supreme Court in 1954, 4 years before I was born. But schools did not integrate overnight. It took years and years, right? Yeah. So one time when I came back, 1968, I'm age 10. And I was one of 2 black children in the entire school, myself in 4th grade and a little black girl in 2nd grade. So really, I didn't see a whole lot of her. Because, being a big, bad 4th grader, I didn't associate with underclassmen, right? So all of my friends are 4th and 5th graders. Consequently, they all were white. And several of my male friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. So it sounded like fun, tie knots, go camping. So I joined the Cub Scouts. And I had a great den mother, great troop den, and all that. And this is in a place called Belmont, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
Belmont is a suburb to Boston, okay?
Belmont.
And right next door to Belmont are Lexington and Concord.
Yep.
So we had a parade from Lexington to Concord. The Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, the Brownies, the 4-H Club, other organizations, to celebrate the ride of Paul Revere. My den mother let me carry the American flag. And so I'm the only Black participant in this parade. Streets were blocked off, sidewalks were lined with nothing but white people. And, we're marching, people are waving and cheering and smiling and yelling the British are coming and all that kind of thing. And everything was going along fine until we got to a certain point in this parade route when suddenly I'm getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and just small debris from the street by just a small group of white spectators off to my right on the sidewalk. And I turned to see who was doing it, and I saw a couple of kids, maybe a year or two older than me, and a couple of adults who were throwing things. Wow. And I didn't know them. I assume it was kids and their parents, maybe, I don't know. But my first inclination was, these people over here, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was, because I had no precedent for this kind of behavior, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't until my den mother, my cub master, my troop leader, who all were white, came running and huddled over me with their bodies and quickly escorted me out of the danger. And I kept saying, what's happening? Why are they doing this? I didn't do anything to them. Why are they doing this? And all they would do is kind of shush me and rush me along, tell me to keep moving, everything will be okay. And they never answered my question. And I realized that I was the only person getting this special protection. None of my fellow Scots were getting this. I think some of them may have gotten hit or something like that, but just, by random things. But so at the end of the parade, they still hadn't told me what was going on. We came back to our meeting place, and I went home. And my mother and father were not at the parade, and they were putting used to be some red sticky stuff called mercurochrome, putting mercurochrome and Band-Aids on me, and asking me, "How did you trip and fall down and get all scraped up?" And I told them I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what had transpired. And for the first time in my life, my mother and father sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Now, you might find this hard to believe, but it's true. At the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. It wasn't something that was in my sphere. I was around people from all over the world. We didn't have those problems. And, I didn't have big brothers and sisters. I'm an only child. So I didn't learn anything from, their experiences being passed down. I relied on my mom and dad if I had a problem or a question. And they always gave me the answer or the solution, or they gave me the tools by which I could derive it myself. When they were telling me why this was happening to me, I literally did not believe them. Because, several reasons. One, my 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that someone who had never spoken to me, someone who had never seen me, someone who knew nothing about me, would want to inflict pain upon me for no other reason than this, the color of my skin. It made absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
And furthermore, to prove that my parents were wrong, the people who were doing that to me over here on the sidewalk did not look any different to me than my classmates here in school in Belmont.
Right.
Or for that matter, my fellow Americans at the embassy overseas in various countries, or my little French friends, or my Danish or Swedish friends. So my parents had it wrong. People don't do things like that because of the color. Well, it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
I didn't believe them. Well, about a month and a half to 2 months later, that same year, 1968, on April the 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And every major city in this country, Chicago, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, all burned to the ground with violence, destruction, all in the name of this new word that I had learned a couple months ago, racism. And so now I realized that my parents had told me the truth. This phenomenon does exist.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did not understand is why. And so at that juncture, I accepted this thing exists, but why? I formed a question in my own mind at the age of 10, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And so for the next 54 years, because I'm 64 now, I was 10 then,
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking for the answer to that question.
Wow.
And that, that fall, because he was murdered in April. We were there through August, and then we went back overseas. And I returned to normalcy. But every time I would come back home, there'd be some incident.
Wow.
And so I would buy books on Black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, racism, anti-Semitism, you name it. I've got a vast library on it. There were no classes you could take, like Race 101. That doesn't even exist today.
Yeah.
So I would self-educate, and I still do that. And so my books would talk about these things, but they wouldn't tell me why. And when I would ask people, they would say, oh, Daryl, that's just the way it is. Some people are just like that. Well, yeah, but why? Well, that's just how it is. Well, no, it has to be a reason, right? So
Wow.
I never got the answer. Okay, so now let's fast forward. We go, I decided, I went to high school, had some incidents in high school, and I decided I was going to major in music. Now, how does that work? I did not play music in high school.
Really?
I was a late
No
bloomer.
piano, nothing by high school.
Wow.
What?
Well, what happened was this. I had friends. I was not in any of the bands. I had friends who were like in marching band, concert band, jazz band. And, I'd get them to show me little things, and I'd practice them. And some of them were in little rock and roll bands outside of school.
Yeah.
Show me stuff. So I'd practice it. And I went out because, you have to audition to major in music, when you go to college. And I went out and bought books, taught myself how to read music.
What?
And so I auditioned for 3 schools, and surprisingly, I passed all 3 auditions.
Oh,
But I had
my
bad
gosh.
habits. It's like, when you self-teach yourself how to type, you do this kind of
Yep.
thing instead of this.
Yep.
So I was playing the piano with the wrong fingering, the wrong hand position, all that.
Wow.
And so they had to straighten me out, had me
Wow.
play scales and all that kind of thing. But I majored in music. Music became my profession, but studying race relations became my obsession.
Wow.
And I graduated in 1980, a high school in 76, college in 1980, with my bachelor's in music and jazz performance, and I minored in voice. And shortly thereafter, country music had made a resurgence. And, if you wanted to work playing music full time, you played whatever was popular.
Yeah.
So I joined a country band. And I like country music. And, it's no different than the blues, same 3 chords. So I joined this country band. It was an all-white band. I was the only black guy in the band, and usually the only black guy where we would play. There was a place called the Silver Dollar Lounge in a town called Frederick, Maryland. Frederick, Maryland is about an hour and 20 minutes north of Washington, D.C. The Silver Dollar Lounge had a reputation of being an all-white lounge. There were no signs that said, no blacks, whites only, nothing like that. But you knew. And when you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it's not always a good combination, right?
Wow.
So the band had played there before. They were pretty well established in the Maryland area. I'd never been in. I knew of it, but I'd never been in there. So they had a gig there. So here I am in the Silver Dollar Lounge, right?
Yeah.
No problems, and people looked at me, of course, when I came through the door, but no problems. We played our first set and took a break, and I'm following the band over to the band table to sit down when I feel somebody come up from behind and put their arm around my shoulder. And he says, man, I sure like your all's music. I said, thank you, and I shook his hand. And he pointed at the stage, and he says, this is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. I was not offended by it, but I was rather surprised that this guy, being at least a decade and a half older than me, that he did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's piano style. And I proceeded to explain to him that Jerry Lee got it from the same place I did, from black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where rock and roll, rockabilly evolved. Oh, no, I ain't never seen no black man play like that, except for you. He didn't believe me.
Wow.
But he was fascinated. I said, look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee is a good friend of mine. He's told me himself where his influences were. He didn't believe that either.
Wow.
But
Wow.
But he was fascinated with me and wanted me to come back to his table and let him buy me a drink. Now, I don't drink alcohol, but I agreed to go back to his table. I ordered a cranberry juice. He paid the waitress. She brought it. He took his glass and he clinked my glass and cheered me. And then he says, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man.
Wow.
And now I'm totally baffled. That's why it was important to give you my early background.
Yeah.
Because, at that point, I had sat down with thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. Mm-hmm. How is it that this guy had never sat down before with a black person? And so, nothing was registering here. And so innocently, I asked him, I said, why? And he stared down at the tabletop and didn't answer me. I asked him again, I said, why? And his buddy sitting next to him said, tell him. Elbowed him. Now I'm totally mystified, what's going on here? I said, why? And I said, tell me. And he says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. So I burst out laughing at him because now I didn't believe him.
Oh, wow.
Like I told you, I have just about every book written on the Klan. I know a lot about the Klan. And they don't just come up and embrace a black guy and want to buy him a drink and hang out and praise their talent or whatever. So I figure, okay, he's making a joke. So I'm laughing. He goes inside his pocket, pulls out his wallet, handed me his Klan membership card. I instantly recognized the Klan logo, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center. And I stopped laughing because it wasn't funny anymore. This thing is for real. So I gave it back to him. And we talked about the Klan and some other things. But this guy was very, very friendly. And he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him whenever I was to return to this bar with this band because he wanted to bring his friends, with the pointed hats and right? Klansmen and Klanswomen to see, as he put it, the black guy who plays like Jerry Lee. I'm not so sure he called me a black guy to his friends, but that's how he called me, in front of him. And so I said, okay. So I called him every 6 weeks because, we're on a rotation, the other bands. Call him on a Wednesday or Thursday, say, hey, man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar coming out. He'd come both Friday and Saturday. He'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen, not in robes and hoods, but in regular street clothes. They'd come in, they'd gather around the stage, and they'd watch me play with the band. They'd get out and dance to our music. And on the breaks, I'd make my way over to his table to thank him for coming, say hello. Most of the Klan people would stay there. There were a couple of them. Every time I'd come over that way, they'd see me coming, they'd get up and they'd move to the other side of the room. So the implied message was, we don't want to shake your hand. We don't want to talk to you. We just want to look at you. Okay, fine. That's all I got. Wow. But sit down there and talk with those who were curious. And this went on for a while. And by the end of that year, I quit the band and I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else was going on. So, I lost touch with the guy. I had no reason to, stay in contact with the Klan. And several years later, it dawned on me, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap and you didn't even realize it. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization with over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them or who don't believe as they believe. So get back in contact with that guy, ask him, get him to fix you up with the Klan leader from Maryland. Let me give you the hierarchy of how the Klan works. Today, there's no such thing as the Ku Klux Klan. There used to be the Ku Klux Klan and then chapters of the Ku Klux Klan all around different states. But over time, it splintered up. So now today you have many Ku Klux Klan groups. They all are autonomous. They all use the same colors on their robes, the same titles, the same secret handshake, the same passwords, etc. and they all believe the same thing. However, if you see some of these groups together out in public, they will hold a united front. But behind closed doors, they hate each other. They're rivals with each other. But when you hate others, you're basically hating yourself too. So as a national Klan leader, a national Klan group, you need a national leader. We call our national leader the president, who oversees all our 50 states. They call theirs the imperial wizard. Anybody that is prefixed with the word imperial means that person is a national officer. And then you get down to the next high level, which would be a state leader, which we would call the governor. They call their state leader the Grand Dragon. Anybody on the grand level means that person is state. Okay, so I wanted to meet the Grand Dragon of Maryland and interview him. So I decided, okay, I'm going to, reach out to that guy, from years ago at the Silver Dollar. So it took me a while to track him down. He had moved, didn't have a phone, but he had an address. So I decided I'm going to go to that address and knock on his door.
Wow. And the purpose of this meeting was still just to get that answer to your question?
Yeah, and for him to hook me up with his boss, the Grand Dragon.
Yeah.
Right? So I went over to his house, to his apartment rather, and about 7:30 in the evening one evening, I knock on the door, and I haven't seen him in a few years, right? He opens the door, he goes, Daryl, what are you doing here? And he goes, what's going on, man? Are you still playing? What's going on? I said, yeah, I'm still playing, but listen, I need to talk to you about the Klan. And I said, do you know Roger Kelly? Yeah, I know Roger. Roger was my Grand Dragon. I said, well, listen, I need to talk to Roger Kelly. But because he did not want to introduce me to Roger Kelly.
Wow.
He was fearful. This guy really liked me, genuinely liked me.
Yeah.
He was fearful for my safety and for his own if he were to take me, this black guy, to this Grand Dragon. So I begged and pleaded with him to give me Mr. Kelly's home address and phone number. After 20 minutes of, figuratively twisting his arm, he finally gave it to me on the condition that I not tell Mr. Kelly where I got it. I said, fine. So he warned me. He said, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly will kill you. And like I said, this guy was genuinely concerned. I said, okay. I said, but that's the reason why I need to see Mr. Kelly. Why would he do that? Just because I'm black? I mean, come on, right? So he said, I just advise you don't fool with him.
Wow.
All right. So I had my secretary give Mr. Kelly a call. I could have called him myself, but I figured if I called Roger Kelly, he might pick up in my voice that I'm black and say, I'm not talking to you, click. And my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. But if Mary called him, he would know that this voice on the other end of the phone is a white lady. And I knew the mentality well enough to know that he would not automatically think that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they didn't exist. My book became the first. She called him, and he didn't ask what color I was. He agreed to do the interview. So we set it up for a room in the motel right above the Silver Dollar Lounge. Silver Dollar Lounge is in the basement downstairs. And Mary and I got there several hours early because the Klan will send out scouts before they bring one of their leaders, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure, we're, in there before the scouts come and word gets back. So I had Mary go get the room. Then I just went around the other side and came up the stairs.
Were you nervous? Like, this actually does feel like this was a real risk. Like, why?
It was a risk, but no, I wasn't nervous because I knew I had to do this.
Okay.
And I had no idea what Mr. Kelly was going to do when he saw me. I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be hospitable. I was going to offer him a cold beverage, just like, you all offered me, water. Or if you came to visit me, I would offer you something, right? And so she got all that set. And just by happenstance, the room in the motel, I guess all the rooms, were like that. But you got to come through the door. You have no idea who's in the room until you come halfway in. I took the little lamp table, put a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly, chair on this side for me. I had a cassette recorder, which I placed on the table, all in hopes that A, he would come in, and B, that he would allow me to record. Okay? And I had blank cassettes, and I had a copy of the Bible. Why the Bible? Because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization.
Yeah.
And they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, in my reading of the Bible, I've never seen that. Someone to be able to, pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please, show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all prepared, right? Yeah. Right on time, 5:15. Mary hops up, runs around the corner, opens the door. I'm seated back there where you can't see me until you come in. In walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk, Grand being state. Nighthawk means bodyguard in Klan terminology. In walks this Grand Nighthawk. He's wearing military fatigues, the red circle patch with the white cross, blood drop in the center, the letters KKK right here, and Knights of the Ku Klux Klan embroidered on his cap. And over here, he had a semi-automatic handgun in a holster. He comes in, he comes around the corner, and he sees me, and just like freaks, right? Just freezes. And Mr. Kelly was on the other side of the corner, and he did not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short. So when he came around the corner, he slammed into the guy's back and knocked the guy forward. And now they both are like stumbling around. But I could read their faces. Their faces were saying, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number? Or is this an ambush? Because, they were expecting a white guy. So I stood up and I went like this to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward. I said, hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis. He shook my hand.
Wow.
So far, so good. The Nighthawk shook my hand. I said, please, come on in. They came in. Have a seat, please. Mr. Kelly sat down. The Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. And before I could sit down, Mr. Kelly says, Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification? I said, sure. I gave him my driver's license. He looked at it, he goes, oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring. That had me a little concerned.
Yeah.
Why is he checking my address?
Yeah.
Is he going to come to my house and burn a cross? I mean, what's up?
Yeah.
So, but I did not want to let him know that he had unnerved me a little bit. I said, yes, Mr. Kelly. I said, that is where I live. And you live at. And I named and I named his house number and his street.
Oh my goodness.
And, so I was letting him know, if he comes to visit me, I might come visit him. So we're going to confine all this visiting to this motel room, right? And he smiled. He nodded his head like he understood. So anyway, so we got on with this conversation and interviewing. And every time, he would say, Mr. Davis, the Bible says, you should get that Bible. Please, show me, please, chapter and verse, right? Or my cassette, my cassette ran out. I reached down and get a fresh cassette. Every time I reached down like this, the Nighthawk reached up like this. Now, he never pulled the gun, but he just, rested his hand on the butt.
Mm-hmm.
And this went on for a little while, and then he finally he was doing his job. I understood that. He doesn't know me, I'm the enemy, and he doesn't know what's in my bag. So that's his job, to protect himself and his boss. So I got that. Well, after a little while, I went in and out of the bag. He didn't move. He figured there's no threat in the bag. So everything was cool. So now Mr. Kelly and I are just, we're closer than you and I are right now, because there's some, little tables in the motel rooms. We're just talking, and suddenly out of nowhere, a very fast, very short noise occurred, like a that was it. And we all jumped. I came up out of my chair, and I hit the table. And I didn't know what that noise was. I knew that Mr. Kelly made it. Now, how did I know that? Because I didn't make it. So it's natural, if you don't do something, you blame it on somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So, and because the noise happened so fast and so short, my ear could not discern what it was. But I perceived it to be an ominous noise, a threatening noise. After all, hey, I'm black. This is the head of the Klan for the state of Maryland. One of his former members told me, Daryl, don't fool with him, he'll kill you. So I got all that going through my head. So what had happened was I feared for my life. And that's how I reacted. And I came up out of that chair. When you fear for your life, you go into what's called survival mode. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you a little bit about that off camera sometime. But when you fear for your life, you go into what's called survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you will do anything and everything to preserve your well-being or the well-being of your family or whatever it is you're trying to protect, right? And there are only about 4 things you can do. Some people, they faint because the fear is so great, their brain can't process it and the brain just shuts down and they fall out. I don't do that. Another thing people will do, their muscles will constrict and they'll ball up like this and start shaking and they can't move. That's called paralysis by fear. They can't move, okay? I don't do that either. The third thing people will do is to run away. That is the best option if it's available. As quickly as you can, separate yourself from the source of the fear. Get away from it. That was not an option for me because I cannot outrun a bullet in a motel room.
Right.
I'm not armed. My secretary is not armed. The only person who I know who's armed for sure is the Nighthawk, because I can see his gun right here.
Yeah.
Mr. Kelly is wearing a suit and tie. I don't know if he has a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. All I know is I don't have one and I can't outrun it, right? So your fourth option is to do what's called a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. So when I came up out of that chair, hit the table, I was on my way to dive across the table, grab the Nighthawk, grab the Grand Dragon, and slam them down to the ground and take away the Nighthawk's gun and neutralize the situation.
Yeah.
All right. But when I hit the table, we're just a little over a foot apart. I'm looking right into Roger Kelly's eyes. I didn't say one word. I knew he could read my eyes. My eyes were shouting so loud he could hear my eyes. My eyes were saying to him, "What did you just do?" Well, Mr. Kelly's eyes were fixated on my eyes. He didn't say a word either, but I could read his eyes like telepathy. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?" And the Nighthawk's like this, looking at both of us like, what did either one of y'all just do, right? Mary, my secretary, she was sitting to my left on top of the dresser because there were no more chairs. She realized what had happened, and she began explaining it when it happened again. And we all began laughing. What had happened was the ice in the ice bucket had begun melting, and the cans of soda were falling down the ice. That was it.
Yeah.
And so we began laughing. But, this proved that we all were human beings. We all felt fear. We became fearful of one another because you fear those things of which you're ignorant, right?
Yeah.
If you don't address that fear will then escalate into hatred because we hate the things that frighten us. If you don't address the hatred, that hatred will then escalate into destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. Mm-hmm. But guess what? At the end of the day, they may have been harmless and we were simply ignorant. So we saw that whole chain almost unravel to completion. Right. Had the Nighthawk pulled his gun and shot somebody, namely me or my secretary, or had I pounced across the table and grabbed them and hurt them. Now, you did see exactly what I'm talking about unravel to full completion 5 years ago on August 12th, 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia. You probably watched it on TV, right? At the white supremacist rally. On August 12th, 2017, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville. There was a lot of fear in Charlottesville. There was a lot of hatred there. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction when a white supremacist got inside his vehicle, attempted to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving that car full speed, full force into the crowd. He succeeded in injuring just over 24 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer.
Yeah.
I never met Heather, but I know her mother. Her mother's a friend of mine, Susan Bro. This is what happens. Ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, and let me say, we're talking about adults right now, but it's the same thing for children. I'll give you an example, right? I can be in a classroom and they're, these little kids, sitting at their little desks and chairs, they go 7 rows back or whatever. And I'll just be talking casually. And then all of a sudden out of the blue, I'll say, hey, there's a snake under your chair, right? And they all jump. Not only the person whose chair I point to in the front row, everybody in there throws their legs up in the air and starts screaming, right? And then they realize, there's no snake. Why is this guy doing this? And we all start laughing. And so I say, why were you all screaming? What's wrong with y'all? Oh, I hate snakes. I'm afraid of snakes. Well, there's your fear. There's your hatred, right? And so I say, well, why do you hate snakes? Why are you afraid of snakes? Oh, they're slimy. They're poisonous. Well, there's your ignorance. Yeah. If you ever touch a snake, it's not slimy at all. It's dry, all right? And not all snakes are poisonous. So there's your ignorance, there's your fear, there's your hatred. So then I say to them, okay, obviously there's no snake under your chair, but let's just say there really was a snake under your chair. What would you want me to do about it? You know what they say? Kill it. There's your destruction. Wow. So what I say is this. We spend too much time addressing the destruction. Forget about the destruction. I mean, don't forget it, but put it aside, okay?
Yeah.
What's been destroyed is not coming back. Don't worry about the destruction. It's a byproduct of the nucleus, the root cause. Forget about the hatred. That too is a byproduct. Forget about the fear. That's a byproduct. Address the nucleus. The nucleus is the ignorance. If you can cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear.
Wow.
Because we fear that of which is ignorance, right? With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy.
Yeah.
The good thing is there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure, right? And that's where we need to invest our time, our energy, our efforts, and our money. And we can do that, all right? But if we're spending way too much time on the symptoms, it's like cancer. You got cancer in the bone. You can't put a Band-Aid on top. Yeah. You got to, put that chemo or radiation down to the bone. So that's where I'm at. We spend way too much time in this country talking about the other person, talking at the other person, or talking past the other person. Yeah. Why don't we spend some time talking with the other person? I am a firm believer that a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. Nothing gets resolved without talking about it. Over time, these conversations, I'm going to tell you about Roger Kelly right now. Roger Kelly went on to become an imperial wizard. I'd invite him down to my house. And he'd come down to my house, he'd bring his Nighthawk with him, right? And he'd sit on my couch, Nighthawk sit next to him, I'm sitting across in my chair. And sometimes the Nighthawk get bored, right? Pull out his gun and twirl it on his finger like this while Mr. Kelly and I are talking across my coffee table. And after a year, we would even have lunch or dinner at my dining room table. Wow. Okay? After a year of this, he stopped bringing down the Nighthawk. He trusted me that much, right? A year later, 2 years now, I'd never been to his house. He'd been to my house. If I wanted to meet him, say, hey, come run an errand with me. I'm gonna be up in your county. He said, okay, I'll meet you at wherever. We always met at some park and ride. He didn't want me to come to his house. So 2 years later, he gets promoted from Grand Dragon, state leader, to Imperial Wizard, national leader. And now he's inviting me to his house. Wow. So I go to his house, I see his clan den, take some pictures. He invites me to rallies. I watch them light up the big cross on fire and parade around it and give all these, white supremacist speeches. But the whole time, I'm treating him with respect, because what I've learned is this. Between traveling with my parents around the world and traveling now as an adult, a performer, I perform music around the world, I lecture around the world. When you combine my childhood travels with my adulthood travels, I've now been in 61 countries on 6 continents. I've played in all 50 states. Now, what does that mean? It means that I've been exposed to a multitude of skin colors, ethnicities, cultures, ideologies, religions, persuasions, etc. And all of that has helped shape who I've become. And what I can tell you is this, not an opinion, this is a fact. No matter how far I go from our country, the U.S., whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico, or whether it's halfway around the globe, no matter how different the people may be who I encounter, they may not look like me, they don't speak my language or worship as I do, everybody wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be respected. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be treated fairly and truthfully. And everybody basically wants the same things for their family as we want for our families. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values, or any of those 5 values, when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or in a culture or society in which we're unfamiliar or uncomfortable, I will guarantee that the navigation of that situation, society, or culture will be much more smooth and much more positive. So that's what I would apply when I'm dealing with these people. I did not respect what Roger Kelly had to say. I'm not a racist or a separatist, a nationalist, supremacist, whatever, right? I did not respect what he had to say, but I respected his right to say it. I allowed him to be heard. And so in exchange, he reciprocated. And so apparently the things that I was saying began to make more sense to him than what he believed. And he struggled with that for a while because it caused a cognitive dissonance in his mind.
Yeah.
And then eventually, you got to make up your mind. And so today I own Roger Kelly's Robin Hood.
Wow.
And I have a ton of those things. I've been doing it for about 40 years. But, that's part of the key. It takes time.
Yeah.
It's incremental.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
I'm curious about that because I could imagine someone saying, but it's just a drop in a bucket. Like it to really have the kind of conversation, the kind of relationship that will actually change someone's mind. It's got to be that. It feels like it's probably got to be that personal. It's so easy to create an echo chamber and to feel really good about yourself and the education that you're providing, but you're attracting people who already agree with you. So how do you get into circles where someone totally disagrees with you and where you can kind of start establishing this dynamic where you're actually listening to each other?
I had to seek them out. I mean, the first one came to me. The Klansman came to me,
right?
Yeah.
Right. But after that, I decided, hey, I want to find some more of these people. So I traveled up north, down south, Midwest, West. Some of them, many of them would talk to me. Some of them would not talk to me. Some of them wanted to fight me. So sometimes things, got a little violent. Fortunately, I prevailed, both on the street and in court. And but even some of those that I had a fight with would come back to me later and apologize. Some have not. There will be people who will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist on all sides.
Yeah.
Okay, they're just wired that way, or whatever. You don't give up on them, but you put them more on down the list and deal more with the people who are responding, even though they may be negative. They're responding. At least they're willing to talk to you. Deal with them and then work your way down to those.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So you've said if you have an adversary, and you talked a little bit about this, give that person a platform, allow them to air their views. It's very common in society today to see people who would rather stifle opposing viewpoints. Cancel them. Yeah. Why do you think that might be less effective in the long run?
Canceling people?
Yeah.
Because what it does is people want to be heard. Okay? You have a podcast here. Why? Because you want to be heard. You got something to say.
Right.
Okay, people want to hear you out there, right? So someone said, hey, we're going to take Tim and Aubrey off the air. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to go somewhere else where you can be aired.
Yeah.
So when you cancel somebody, you may be canceling them as far as your ears go, but they're going to seek out some other platform where they can express themselves. And what you're doing is, you're causing them to have more resentment. And so they might seek out a more dark and or nefarious platform, on the internet or wherever, where they can air their views. And then, just as you said, Aubrey, find that echo chamber where everybody agrees with those views. And the next thing you know, you have a Charlottesville happening, or an insurrection happening, or things like that. So it's important, that we have these conversations with each other. We don't have to agree with one another, but it's important that we understand why somebody thinks this way, why this person voted for that person, why this person did this or that. It doesn't even have to be about race. It could be any hot topic, like, say, abortion, nuclear weapons, global warming, the war between Russia and Ukraine, or the war in the Middle East, the last presidential election, the upcoming presidential election. These are all hot topics. You're on one side, you may be on the other. You talk, and you don't have to agree, but you'll learn something about one another as to why this person feels that way.
Yeah.
So is that the intention when you're sitting across the table with somebody? Is that really the only intention? Like, are you really just trying to understand where they're coming from, and are you holding back? You're not actually going to explain, like, how. I just feel like that must be so uncomfortable.
I definitely explain, but I don't jump in and cut them off. Like, for example, okay. So I'm sitting here across from this happens plenty times, right? I'm sitting here across from some Klan leader or neo-Nazi or whatever. How can you hate me if you don't even know me? Well, Mr. Davis, you have to understand one thing. Black people are prone to crime, and this is evidenced by the fact that there are more blacks in prison than white people. Well, what he is saying is absolutely 100% correct. There are more black people in prison than white people, all right? The data shows that. The statistics show that. But that's all he needs to edify, what he's thinking, right? He doesn't bother to go find out why, what's behind the data. The data just reports what's there, but not why.
Right.
If you look into it, you might find there is an imbalance in our judicial system that sends black people to prison for longer periods of time than white people who've committed the same crime, you know? So all he sees is the data. And so that's enough for him.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't think about the imbalance. So I'm sitting here listening to this person. Now I realize I have more education than him sitting right there across from me, but I'm not going to throw that in his face, okay? Because the idea is this: when that person first walks into the room and sees me, I'm the enemy. His wall goes right up. He's ready in attack mode, right? Okay, so my job is to bring his wall down. And you bring it down by applying those principles, all right? Because, you know, if I said, well, you know, I got a college education, you barely made it out of high school, well, the wall's going to stay up.
Right.
He doesn't want to hear that,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Yeah.
Or if I said, you know what? You're the criminal. You're the one hanging black men from trees and dragging them behind pickup trucks and bombing their churches. And all of that is true. The Klan has a history of that. But if I go on the attack like that, then I've defeated my purpose. The wall stays up.
Right.
Okay? So I let him, you know, do I find what he is saying to be offensive? Sure, it's offensive. Am I offended by it? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And you know why I'm not offended by it? Because I know who I am. Yeah. He doesn't know me. He just walked in this room.
Yeah.
Right? He sees this and makes all those assertions about me. Yeah. I know who I am. And so that makes him, you know, the wall is down because I've allowed him to be heard, right. You know, and then he's curious. So how come this guy is not, you know, pushing back?
Yeah.
And so he's listening to me.
Yeah.
So now he's more apt to listen to me, to reciprocate.
Yeah.
And here's one thing that's very important is this. Understand that one's perception is one's reality. You know, whatever they think is real, it may not be real, but if they think it's real to them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay? One's perception is one's reality. Do not try to change anybody's reality because you will get pushback, right? If you want somebody to change, what you do is you offer them a better perception or better perceptions. And if they resonate with those perceptions, then that perception will become their reality.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Will you tell us before you go a little bit about the organization FAIR?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, FAIR, F-A-I-R, stands for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. And I am very proud to be a member of FAIR and sit on its board of advisors and be a senior fellow. So, you know, I've been doing this work, like I said, for almost 40 years. And a lot of organizations come to me and want me to be a part of their organization. And I have to, you know, really scrutinize and be careful what I join, et cetera. But FAIR is one of the very few that, you know, that I've chosen. And I would invite anybody and everybody to come join us. We call ourselves pro-human. You know, we don't want to be anti-racist, not anti the person, the racist person.
Right.
We are anti-racism, the ideology, but we're pro-human. We promote the values of all human beings. So I would invite anybody and everybody to come look us up at fairforall.org.
What you've
Thank you
shared
so
with us has
much.
been so inspiring and so relevant and timely for today's society, honestly. Thank you
really
so much for
appreciate
Thank
spending
you for
time
having
with
me. I
us.
really appreciate it.
Thanks, Daryl. Okay, thanks so much for listening, and we really hope that you enjoyed hearing Daryl's story. And again, a huge thanks to Daryl for coming on, and to the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism for arranging this interview. And if Faith Matters content is resonating with you and you get a chance, we'd love for you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen on. It really helps get the word out about Faith Matters, and we really appreciate the support. Thanks again for listening, and as always, you can check out more at faithmatters.org.